A billionaire businessman discovers he has triplets he never knew about, forcing him to confront his past mistakes and choose between his empire and a chance at fatherhood. But before we continue with this heartwarming story, make sure to subscribe to stay updated with more touching family tales, and let us know in the comments where you're watching from today. Christopher Langston stood at the window of his penthouse office, looking down at the city below. Everything he saw belonged to him, or at least that's how it felt. At 45, he had more money than he could spend in 3 lifetimes. His company, Langston Enterprises, was worth billions. The headlines called him one of the most eligible bachelors in the country. But tonight, something felt different. "Mr. Langston," his assistant Barbara knocked on the door. "Your dinner reservation at LeBlanc is in an hour, and the board members are already on their way." Chris adjusted his expensive tie and grabbed his jacket. Another night, another business dinner. This was his life now, meetings, deals, and more meetings. He liked it this way. At least that's what he told himself. "Thank you, Barbara. You can head home now." He smiled at his assistant, a woman who had worked for him for 15 years and probably knew him better than anyone else. Barbara hesitated at the door. "There was one more thing, sir. A letter came for you today from Carter and Associates law firm." Chris froze. Carter, a name he hadn't heard in years. A name he tried very hard not to think about. "Just put it on my desk," he said, trying to sound casual. But his heart was racing. After Barbara left, Chris picked up the envelope. He didn't need to open it to know who it was from. Jasmine Carter, his ex-wife, the woman he had loved more than anything, until his ambition got in the way. Memories flooded back as he held the unopened letter, their small apartment when they were first married. Jasmine's laugh, the way she used to bring him coffee in bed every morning. The fights that started small but grew bigger. The day she walked out, tears streaming down her face, saying she couldn't compete with his need for success. "Not now," he muttered, putting the letter in his drawer. He had a dinner to get to. Important people were waiting. The restaurant was exactly what you'd expect for one of the most expensive places in the city. Crystal chandeliers, soft music, waiters who moved like shadows. Chris sat at the head of the table, laughing at jokes that weren't funny, making small talk with people he barely knew. "And then I told him the stock wasn't worth the paper it was printed on," one of the board members, Harold, was saying. Everyone laughed on cue. That's when Chris saw her. She was sitting 3 tables away, still as beautiful as the day he met her, Jasmine. Her dark hair was shorter now, but her smile, that smile that had once been his whole world, was exactly the same. She was having dinner with someone Chris couldn't see clearly. Then he heard it. Children laughing. 3 children, to be exact, all about 5 years old, gathered around Jasmine's table. 2 girls and a boy. They had her smile, but something about them made Chris's blood run cold. The boy's eyes, the way one of the girls tilted her head. These weren't just any children. "Mr. Langston, are you all right?" Harold was looking at him with concern. Chris couldn't breathe. He couldn't think. Math wasn't his best subject, but he could count. 5 years. The divorce was 6 years ago. Jasmine had left him, and he had been too proud, too stubborn to fight for her. Had she been... "Excuse me," he said, standing up so quickly his chair almost fell over. "I need some air." But instead of heading to the door, his feet carried him toward Jasmine's table. She was laughing at something one of the girls had said when she looked up and saw him. The laughter died on her lips. "Chris," she said softly. Not angry, not happy, just careful. The children looked up at him curiously. The boy had his eyes, exactly his eyes. "Are they—" He couldn't finish the sentence. Jasmine's face changed. Something like fear mixed with determination crossed her features. "They're mine," she said firmly. "Mommy, who's that?" one of the girls asked, the one with Jasmine's exact smile. "Just someone Mommy used to know," Jasmine answered, but her eyes never left Chris's face. A long time ago. Chris felt like the room was spinning. These children, these beautiful, perfect children, they had to be his. The timing, their faces, the way they moved. How had he not known? Why hadn't she told him? "We need to talk," he managed to say. "No, we don't," Jasmine replied, but her voice shook slightly. "You made your choice a long time ago, Chris. You chose your empire over everything else, over me, over us. But there..." He lowered his voice, aware of the curious looks from nearby tables. "Mine," Jasmine repeated firmly. "They're mine. I tried to tell you, Chris, when I found out I was pregnant. I called your office dozens of times. I wrote letters. You had changed your number. Your assistant, not Barbara, the one before her, said you were too busy. After a while I got the message. You didn't want to be found. Chris felt like he'd been punched in the gut. He remembered those months after Jasmine left, how he'd thrown himself into work, changed his number, hired a new assistant, anything to avoid dealing with the pain of losing her. I didn't know, he whispered. Would it have made a difference? Jasmine asked, and for a moment he saw the pain she still carried. Would you have chosen differently? Before he could answer, one of the girls tugged at Jasmine's sleeve. Mommy, can we have dessert now? You promised? Jasmine's face softened as she looked at her daughter, their daughter. Of course, sweetie. Why don't you three look at the dessert menu and pick something special? The children eagerly grabbed the menus, giving Chris a chance to really look at them. The boy had his mother's dark hair but his father's strong jaw, even at this young age. The girls were identical twins, perfect mixtures of him and Jasmine. What are their names? He asked, quietly. Jasmine hesitated, then sighed. Mia and Sophie are the girls. The boy is James. James, Chris's father's name. Had she done that on purpose? They're beautiful, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Yes, they are. Jasmine's voice was softer now. And they're happy. We're happy. Jasmine, please, we need to talk about this, really talk. She looked at him for a long moment, then pulled out a business card. My office number. Call tomorrow. Not for us, that ship has sailed, but for them, if you're serious, if you're ready to be there for someone besides yourself. Chris took the card with trembling fingers. Back at his table, his colleagues were pretending not to stare. His perfectly ordered world had just been turned upside down, and nothing would ever be the same. As he walked back to his table on shaky legs, he could hear the children's laughter behind him. His children's laughter. And for the first time in years, his empire of glass and steel felt hollow compared to what he had lost, and what he might have found again. Chris barely slept that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw their faces, his children. The word felt strange even in his thoughts. He had 3 children he never knew about, 3 lives he had missed out on for 5 years. The next morning, he arrived at his office earlier than usual. Barbara was already there, efficient as always, with his coffee ready. Barbara, he said, his voice serious, I need you to tell me the truth. 5 years ago, did Jasmine try to contact me? Barbara's face changed. She set down the coffee cup slowly. Yes, sir, many times. And what happened to those messages? Miss Reynolds, your assistant at the time, she said you had given strict instructions not to be disturbed by your ex-wife. She returned all the letters and blocked the calls. Chris sank into his chair. Why didn't you tell me this when you took over? By then it had been months. I assumed... Barbara hesitated. I assumed you knew what you were doing. You never mentioned her name. Not once in all these years. Chris pulled out Jasmine's business card from his pocket. It was already worn from how many times he had handled it since last night. Carter and Associates law firm. She had become a lawyer just like she'd always dreamed. Get Miss Reynolds on the phone, he said quietly. I want every letter, every message that Jasmine sent. Everything. Sir, that was 5 years ago. Miss Reynolds probably didn't keep... Find them, Chris interrupted. Whatever it takes, and clear my schedule for the afternoon. At exactly 1 o'clock, Chris stood outside Jasmine's office building. It was a modest law firm, nothing like his gleaming corporate headquarters, but it had character, just like her. The receptionist led him to a small but neat office. Jasmine was at her desk, reading. Glasses perched on her nose, surrounded by papers. She looked up when he entered, and he saw she'd been expecting him. You came, she said simply. Did you think I wouldn't? Honestly, I didn't know. The Chris I knew would have moved heaven and earth to be here, but the Chris you became soon, she shrugged. I wasn't sure. I found out about Miss Reynolds, he said, sitting down across from her, about the letters and calls. Does that make a difference? It makes all the difference. His voice rose slightly, and he forced himself to calm down. Jasmine, if I had known you were pregnant, you would have what? She took off her glasses. Thrown money at the situation. Added us to your busy schedule between board meetings. That's not fair. No? Tell me something, Chris. Yesterday at the restaurant, that was a business dinner, wasn't it? Some important deal you couldn't miss. He nodded slowly. And how many of those dinners do you have in a week? That's different. I didn't know I had a family. But you did have a family. You had me, and that wasn't enough. The truth of her words hit him hard. She was right. Even before she left, He had been pulling away, choosing work over their marriage, success over love. "Tell me about them," he said softly. "Please." Something in his voice must have reached her because her expression softened. She opened a drawer and pulled out a photo album. "Mia is the oldest, by 2 minutes," she said, showing him a picture. "She's the artist of the family, always drawing, always creating something. Sophie is our little scientist. She wants to know how everything works. And James," she smiled, "James is just like you were before the money changed everything. Kind, thoughtful, always trying to make people laugh." Chris's throat tightened as he looked at the photos. First steps, first words, first day of preschool, all the moments he had missed. "They've asked about their father," Jasmine continued. "I've never lied to them. I told them their daddy was someone I loved very much, but he had to go away. And now?" Chris's voice was barely a whisper. "Now?" Jasmine sighed. "Now they're old enough to start asking harder questions, and honestly, I don't know what to tell them anymore." "Tell them the truth," Chris said. "Tell them their father was a fool who lost his way, but he wants to make it right. It's not that simple. Chris, they have a life, a routine, they're happy. I'm not asking to disrupt their lives. I'm asking for a chance to know them, to be their father. And what happens when the next big deal comes along, when your empire needs you more than they do?" Chris reached across the desk and took her hand. She didn't pull away. "I was wrong, Jasmine, about everything. I thought success meant having the biggest company, the most money, but sitting in that restaurant last night, watching our children laugh, that was worth more than every deal I've ever made." Tears formed in Jasmine's eyes. "I wanted to tell you so many times, even after the pregnancy, after they were born, but you had made it so clear that your new life didn't have room for me. I couldn't bear to be rejected again." "I'm sorry," he said, and he meant it more than any words he'd ever spoken. "I know those words aren't enough, but I am so sorry." Just then, his phone buzzed. Barbara's name flashed on the screen. Without hesitation, Chris turned the phone off completely. Jasmine noticed. "Don't you need to get that?" "No," he said firmly. "Nothing is more important than this conversation." She studied his face for a long moment. "The children have a play at school next week. They're doing the 3 Little Pigs. Mia is the smart pig who builds with bricks. Would it be okay if I came?" "3rd row, left side," Jasmine said quietly. "That's where I always sit. It starts at 2. Chris felt hope bloom in his chest for the first time since last night. "I'll be there." "Chris?" Jasmine's voice stopped him as he stood to leave. "If we do this, if we let you into their lives, you have to be sure, really sure, because if you disappear on them like you did on me, I won't," he promised. "I've spent the last 5 years chasing things that don't matter. I'm done running." As he walked out of her office, Chris pulled out his phone and turned it back on. Dozens of messages and missed calls lit up the screen. Important people demanding his attention, deals waiting to be made, money waiting to be earned. For the first time in his life, none of it seemed to matter. He called Barbara. "Cancel everything next week, and find me some books about parenting. And what do 5-year-olds like? What toys, what games? I need to learn everything." "Of course, Mr. Langston," Barbara replied, and he could hear the smile in her voice. "And sir, it's good to have the old you back." Chris looked back at Jasmine's office building. Somewhere in this city, 3 children were going about their day, not knowing that their father's heart was already overflowing with love for them. He had a lot to make up for, a lot to prove, but for the first time in years, he was ready to fight for something real. The elementary school auditorium was packed with parents, all holding phones and cameras, ready to record the 3 Little Pigs. Chris sat nervously in the 3rd row, left side, just where Jasmine had told him to be. He had left 3 board meetings and $1 million deal to be here, and for once, he didn't regret it one bit. Jasmine arrived with the children, all 3 of them dressed in their costumes. She noticed him immediately but didn't seem surprised. She had known he would come. He had texted her every day this week to confirm the time and place. "Remember," she whispered as she passed his row, "they don't know who you are yet. We agreed to take this slow." Chris nodded. He was just another face in the crowd today, but his heart nearly burst when Mia came on stage in her brick builder pig costume. She delivered her lines perfectly, wagging her finger at her siblings about the importance of building a strong house. Sophie and James sat in the audience with Jasmine, cheering their sister on. After the play, Chris watched from a distance as parents congratulated their children. He wanted so badly to go tell Mia how wonderful she had been, to hug all three of them, but he had promised Jasmine they would do this right. "Mr. Langston," a teacher approached him. "I'm Mrs. Thompson, the children's teacher." Chris tensed. "Does Jasmine know you're talking to me?" The teacher smiled kindly. "She told me you might be here. She also told me the situation." She paused. "They're wonderful children. You should be proud." "I am," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I just wish it's never too late to be a good father," Mrs. Thompson said gently. "Just be patient. They're worth waiting for." Over the next few weeks, Chris learned what it meant to be patient. He started small, sending anonymous gifts to the school, new art supplies for Mia's class, a science kit for Sophie's after-school program, and sports equipment for the playground where James loved to play. Jasmine knew who the gifts were, from, of course. They were so excited about the new soccer balls, she told him, during one of their weekly coffee meetings. These meetings had become their time to talk about the children, to plan the next steps. "And the art supplies?" he asked eagerly. "Mia hasn't put down those new colored pencils since they arrived. She's already filled up half a sketchbook." Chris smiled, imagining his daughter drawing. "I'd love to see her artwork sometime." Jasmine hesitated, then pulled out her phone. "Here," she said, showing him a photo. "She drew this yesterday. It was a picture of 3 pigs, clearly inspired by the play, but they were wearing regular clothes and doing everyday things. One was painting, one was reading a book, and one was playing soccer." "It's them," Chris realized. "She drew herself and her siblings." "She's very observant," Jasmine said. "All 3 of them are. They notice everything." Have they asked about me? About the man from the restaurant?" Jasmine stirred her coffee slowly. "Sophie asked if you were one of Mommy's clients. James said you looked familiar, like someone he'd seen in a dream." Chris's heart ached. "And Mia?" "Mia," Jasmine smiled slightly. "Mia said you had kind eyes. Tears threatened to spill from those kind eyes. When can I meet them? Really meet them?" "Soon," Jasmine promised. "But first, there's something else we need to discuss." She pulled out 3 folders from her bag. Each had a child's name on it. "These are their medical records, school reports, everything you should know. If you're going to be in their lives, you need to know about Sophie's mild allergies, about James's fear of thunderstorms, about Mia's asthma." Chris took the folders like they were made of gold. "I'll memorize every word." "There's more," Jasmine continued. "Sophie has a science fair next month. James has soccer practice every Tuesday and Thursday. Mia has art classes on Wednesdays. Their world doesn't run on business hours, Chris. They need consistency." "I'll rearrange everything," he said without hesitation. "Barbara's already working on restructuring my schedule. I'm delegating more to my VPs." "And what about your board? Won't they object to their CEO suddenly working half days?" Chris's face hardened. "Let them object. I've given that company everything for 15 years. It's time I gave something to my family instead." The word family hung between them, heavy with meaning. They weren't a couple anymore. Both had been clear about that, but they were connected by something stronger than romance. 3 beautiful children who deserved the best of both their parents. That evening, Chris sat in his penthouse, spreading the folders across his coffee table. He had ordered pizza, something he hadn't done in years, and settled in for a night of learning about his children. Sophie was allergic to strawberries and peanuts. James had won a Most Improved Player award in his soccer league last season. Mia had been chosen to have her artwork displayed in the school hallway. His phone buzzed constantly with business calls, but he ignored them all. Instead, he opened his laptop and started making notes. Soccer gear in James's size, art supplies Mia might like, science books for Sophie. Not to send to the school this time, but to have ready at his place, just in case they ever wanted to visit their father. The next morning, he called his real estate agent. "The penthouse isn't right," he said. "I need something more family-friendly, a place with a yard near good schools." "But sir, you just renovated the penthouse last year." "Things change," Chris said, looking at a crayon drawing Jasmine had given him, Mia's latest masterpiece. "People change." Later that week, he met Jasmine for their regular coffee. She looked troubled. "What's wrong?" he asked immediately. "It's James," she said. "He has a father-son day at school next week. He usually takes his uncle, my brother Tom, but this morning he asked me why he doesn't have a dad like his friends do." Chris's heart squeezed painfully. "What did you tell him?" "I told him that families come in all different shapes and sizes. That some kids have two parents, some have one, some have more, but she looked directly at him. I think it's time. Time. Time for you to meet them. Properly, this time. Not as a stranger in a restaurant, but as... She took a deep breath. As their father. Chris felt like his heart might explode. Are you sure? No, Jasmine admitted. But they deserve to know. And you've proven over these past weeks that you're serious about this. You haven't missed a single coffee meeting. You've learned their schedules, their likes and dislikes. You're trying. When? His voice was barely a whisper. This Saturday. I'm taking them to the park near our house. They love the playground there. She smiled slightly. I hear it just got some brand new equipment. Chris tried to look innocent. The playground renovation had been his latest anonymous gift to the community. Thank you, he said softly, for giving me this chance. Don't thank me yet, Jasmine warned. This is just the beginning and it won't be easy. They might be angry, confused, afraid. We need to be ready for anything. We'll handle it together, Chris said. Then, realizing how that sounded, he added, quickly, as parents, I mean, not as... I know what you meant, Jasmine said gently. And you're right. Whatever happens Saturday, we'll handle it together. For them. Chris left the coffee shop feeling like he was walking on air. After 5 years of living in a world of cold business deals and empty success, he was finally going to meet his children. Really meet them. He had 3 days to prepare for the most important meeting of his life. No business deal, no corporate merger, no billion-dollar contract could compare to this. This was about family, about love, about second chances, and Christopher Langston was not going to waste this chance. Saturday morning arrived with dark clouds threatening rain, but Chris didn't care about the weather. He had barely slept, spending most of the night rehearsing what he would say to his children. Now standing in his walk-in closet, he was facing an unexpected crisis. What does a father wear to meet his children for the first time? His phone rang. It was his mother, Eleanor Langston. Christopher, darling, what's this I hear about you? Canceling the Morrison deal. Your father built this company on deals like that. Chris sighed. He hadn't told his parents about the children yet. Mother, I can't talk right now. I have somewhere important to be. More important than $100 million deal? The board is worried, Christopher. They're saying you've changed. Maybe I have, he said, finally selecting a simple blue sweater instead of his usual business suit. And maybe that's not a bad thing. This is about her, isn't it? Eleanor's voice turned cold. I saw you at LeBlanc 2 weeks ago with Jasmine. Chris froze. You were there? I was having dinner with the Whitakers. I saw you approach her table, those children. She paused. Tell me they're not yours. They are, Chris said firmly. You have 3 grandchildren, Mother. Triplets. Their names are Mia, Sophie, and James. The silence on the other end was deafening. Then, how dare she keep this from us? We'll sue for custody. We're Langstons. We have rights. No. Chris's voice was sharp. You will do no such thing. Jasmine raised them perfectly well. Without us, without me. If anyone should be angry, it's them. But the company is just a company, Chris interrupted. These are my children, your grandchildren, and if you want to be part of their lives, you'll respect how Jasmine and I choose to handle this. He hung up before she could respond. His hands were shaking. He should have known his mother would make things difficult. The Langstons weren't used to not getting their way. At the park, Chris arrived early. He sat on a bench, watching other families enjoy their Saturday morning. A father teaching his daughter to ride a bike, a mother pushing her son on the swings. Simple moments he had missed out on. His phone buzzed again. A text from Barbara. Your father is at the office. He's demanding to see you. Chris typed back, tell him I'm busy meeting his grandchildren. A few minutes later, Jasmine's car pulled into the parking lot. Chris's heart stopped when he saw them get out. The children were dressed in bright raincoats. Purple for Mia, yellow for Sophie, blue for James. They ran toward the playground, their mother following more slowly. Are you ready? Jasmine asked when she reached him. No, Chris admitted, but I don't want to wait another minute. They walked together to the playground. The children were already playing, James on the new swing set, the girls taking turns on the slide. Kids, Jasmine called softly, can you come here for a minute? There's someone I want you to meet. The triplets ran over, curious, but not shy. Up close, Chris could see every detail of their faces. Sophie had a small freckle under her left eye, just like him. James's hair fell across his forehead, the same way Chris's did. Mia had her mother's dimples. This is Mr. Langston, Jasmine began, then paused. Christopher, and He's your father." The children stared at him. James's mouth fell open. Sophie grabbed her sister's hand. Mia just tilted her head, studying. Him with those wise eyes. "You're our daddy?" James asked finally. Chris knelt down to their level. "Yes, I am. And I know I haven't been here, and I'm so sorry about that. But I want to be here now if you'll let me." "Where were you?" Sophie's voice was small but clear. Chris looked at Jasmine for help, but she shook her head slightly. They had agreed to be honest. "I was being foolish. I was so busy, trying to be successful that I forgot what really matters. Family matters. You matter. Do you have other kids?" Mia asked. "No," Chris said softly. "Just you three. And you're more than enough. You're everything." Before anyone could say more, a sharp voice cut through the air. "Christopher!" Eleanor Langston was striding across the park, Chris's father Richard right behind her. They were both in business attire, looking completely out of place among the weekend park crowd. "Mother, don't," Chris warned, standing up. "These are our grandchildren," Eleanor announced, looking at the triplets with a mixture of pride and calculation. "They should be at home with us, not in some public park." "Mrs. Langston," Jasmine said coolly, "this isn't the time or place." "Oh, it speaks," Eleanor sneered. "Tell me, dear, how much money did you think you'd get by hiding our grandchildren from us?" The triplets pressed closer to their mother, scared by the angry woman's tone. Chris stepped between his parents and his family. "You will not speak to Jasmine that way," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "She has been a wonderful mother. She protected them, loved them, gave them everything they needed. Where were you? Where was I?" "Son," Richard tried, "be reasonable. Think of the scandal. We need to handle this privately with our lawyers." "No." Chris turned to his children who were watching with wide eyes. "I'm so sorry about this. This isn't how I wanted our first meeting to go. But I want you to know something. Your mother is the strongest, bravest person I know. And everything she's done for you." Mia stepped forward suddenly, her small hand slipping into Chris's. "Your eyes are sad," she said simply. That simple observation, that innocent touch broke something in Chris. Tears fell freely down his face. "I am sad," he admitted. "Sad that I missed so much. Sad that I'm only meeting you now, but also very, very happy that I get to meet you." "At all?" Sophie and James moved closer too, curious rather than afraid now. Eleanor started to say something else, but Richard put a hand on her arm. "Eleanor," he said quietly, "look at them." The children were standing with Chris now, looking up at him with questions in their eyes. Jasmine watched carefully, ready to step in if needed, but letting the moment unfold. "Can we call you Daddy?" James asked suddenly. Chris looked at Jasmine. She nodded slightly. "I would love that," he said, his voice breaking. "But only if you want to. We can take it slow, get to know each other first." "I want to know everything," Sophie declared. "Do you like science?" "I love science, especially space." "And soccer?" James added hopefully. "And drawing?" Mia chimed, and Chris laughed through his tears. "I want to know everything about you too, everything you like, everything you don't like, all your favorite things." Eleanor and Richard stood awkwardly to the side, watching their son interact with his children for the first time. The anger seemed to drain from Eleanor's face, replaced by something softer. "They have your eyes," she said quietly to Chris. "All three of them." "They have a lot more than that," Jasmine said, speaking up. "They have his kindness, his creativity, his spirit. Everything good about Chris before the business world changed him. And now," she looked at Chris with something like hope, "now maybe they'll have their father too." The rain that had been threatening all morning finally began to fall, soft and gentle, but nobody moved. The Langston family, all three generations, stood in the rain watching as something broken began to heal, as something lost began to be found. It wasn't perfect. There would be more difficult conversations, more tears, more adjustments, but it was a start, and sometimes a start is all you need. The weeks following the park meeting brought big changes to everyone's lives. Chris had bought a house just 10 minutes from Jasmine's, a warm, comfortable place with a big backyard and a room for each of the children. He'd let them pick their own colors for the walls, deep purple for Mia's room, sky blue for Sophie's, and forest green for James's. Today was their first overnight visit. Chris had never been more nervous in his life. "The EpiPen for Sophie's allergies is in the kitchen drawer," Jasmine reminded him for the third time. "And Mia's inhaler is in my pocket," Chris finished. "And James might get scared if there's thunder, but reading him a story helps. I remember everything, Jasmine." She nodded, but he could see the worry in her eyes. This was the first night. She would spend away from them since they were born. "Mommy will be fine," Sophie said, hugging her mother's legs. "Daddy has a telescope. He's going to show us the stars." The word daddy still made Chris's heart skip a beat. The children had started using it, naturally, though sometimes they still called him Chris. He treasured both equally. "And he got art supplies," Mia added excitedly. "Real artist ones. And a soccer goal in the backyard." James couldn't contain his joy. Jasmine smiled, despite her anxiety. Okay, you three be good. Call me if you need anything, anytime, okay?" After she left, Chris stood looking at his children, and felt a moment of panic. What did he know about being a father? "Can we have pizza?" James asked hopefully. Chris laughed, relieved. Pizza he could handle. "Sure, buddy, what kind do you like?" "Cheese, pepperoni, everything except anchovies." They all spoke at once, and Chris found himself relaxing. They were just kids, his kids, and they wanted to spend time with him. While waiting for the pizza, Sophie discovered his home office. "What's all this?" she asked, pointing at his computer screens showing stock market data. "That's what I do for work," Chris explained. "I help companies grow and become successful." "Is that why you weren't with us?" The question was innocent, but it hit Chris hard. "Partly," he admitted. "I thought being successful meant making lots of money, but I was wrong. Being successful means being there for the people you love." Sophie considered this, like how Mummy always comes to our school plays. Exactly like that. Chris swallowed hard. "I'm sorry I missed those plays, but I won't miss any more." "Promise?" Sophie's eyes were serious. "I promise." The pizza arrived, and they ate in the living room, something Chris had never done before. The children told him about their school, their friends, their dreams. "I want to be an astronaut," Sophie declared, "and discover new planets." "I'm going to play soccer in the Olympics," James said confidently. "I want to paint pictures that make people happy," Mia added softly. Chris listened to each dream with equal attention. "You can be anything you want to be," he told them. "I'll help you get there." After dinner, they set up the telescope on the back porch. Chris had taken astronomy classes in college, and Sophie was impressed by his knowledge of constellations. "That's Orion," he pointed out. "See his belt? 3 stars in a row." "Like us," Mia exclaimed. "We're 3 in a row too." "Yeah," James agreed. "I'm the middle star." "No, I am," Sophie argued. "Actually," Chris intervened, "you're all special stars. Just like in the sky, each one of you shines in your own way." The children loved this idea, and soon they were making up their own constellations. Chris took pictures on his phone to send to Jasmine, wanting her to be part of the moment too. Bedtime proved more challenging. Despite their excitement about their new rooms, the children were nervous about sleeping in a strange place. "Can we all sleep in the same room?" James asked, clutching his favorite stuffed dog. "Please?" the girls echoed. Chris thought about it. "How about we make a fort in the living room instead?" This suggestion was met with enthusiastic approval. Soon the living room was transformed with blankets, pillows, and Christmas lights Chris had found in a closet. He read them 3 stories, one chosen by each child, until their eyes started drooping. Just as they were falling asleep, thunder rumbled outside. James tensed immediately. "It's okay," Chris soothed, pulling his son close. "Remember what the telescope showed us. Thunder is just the sky saying hello." "That's not scientific," Sophie mumbled sleepily. "No," Chris agreed, "but sometimes it's okay to believe in a little magic." The children finally fell asleep, but Chris stayed awake, watching them breathe. His phone buzzed. A text from Jasmine. "Everything okay?" He sent her the photos from their stargazing session, adding, "All good. They're amazing, Jasmine. You did such a wonderful job with them." Her reply came quickly. "We did make beautiful children, didn't we?" Chris smiled in the dark. "Yes, we did." The next morning, Chris woke to find Mia already up, drawing quietly. In the corner, she had captured their blanket fort perfectly, with 3 small figures sleeping inside and a larger one watching over them. "Is that us?" he asked softly, not wanting to wake the others. Mia nodded. "It's our first night as a real family." Chris felt tears coming again. He seemed to cry a lot these days, but these were happy tears. "Can I keep this drawing? I'd like to. Frame it for my office." "Your work office?" Mia looked surprised. "Yes, so when I'm there I can remember what really matters." Later that morning, when Jasmine came to pick them up, she found them all in the kitchen, attempting to make pancakes. There was flour everywhere and the pancakes were oddly shaped, but everyone was laughing. "Mommy!" The children ran to hug her. "We saw stars and made a fort and Daddy let us put chocolate chips in the pancakes." Jasmine raised an eyebrow at Chris, who shrugged sheepishly. "It was a special occasion." "Can we come back next weekend?" James asked. "Please," the girls added. Jasmine looked at Chris. He tried to keep his face neutral, but she could see the hope in his eyes. "We'll see," she said, but she was smiling. "Maybe next time we could all have dinner together." Chris's heart leaped at the suggestion, not because he thought it meant anything romantic. They were both clear about that chapter being closed, but because it meant she was beginning to trust him with their children. As they were leaving, Sophie turned back. "Daddy, will you come to my science fair next week? I'm doing a project about the stars we saw." "I wouldn't miss it for the world," Chris promised. After they left, Chris walked through his house. It was messier than it had ever been. Blankets everywhere, dishes in the sink, flour on the floor, but it had never felt more like home. He went to his office and pinned Mia's drawing right above his computer screens. Then he called Barbara. "Cancel my Tuesday morning meetings," he said. "My daughter has a science fair to present." "Of course, Mr. Langston," Barbara replied warmly. "Should I get flowers for her?" Chris smiled. "Make it a chemistry set instead." "And Barbara, thank you for understanding." "Thank you for finally understanding too, sir." Chris looked at Mia's drawing again. 3 small stars and 1 big one, all under the same roof. It wasn't the success story he had once dreamed of, but it was better. So much better. It started as a normal Tuesday morning. Chris was reviewing contracts in his office when his phone rang. Seeing Jasmine's name, he smiled, thinking she was calling about their planned family dinner that evening, but her voice was tight with panic. "Chris, it's Mia. They're taking her to the hospital." He was already grabbing his keys. "What happened?" "Her asthma, it's bad this time, really bad. We're in the ambulance now." He could hear sirens in the background and Mia's labored breathing. "Which hospital?" "St. Mary's. Chris, she's so scared." "I'm on my way." He rushed past Barbara's desk. "Cancel everything. Family emergency." The drive to the hospital was a blur. Chris ran 3 red lights, not caring about the tickets. All he could think about was his little girl struggling to breathe. He'd only been a father for a few months. He couldn't lose her now. At the hospital, he found Jasmine in the emergency room, holding Sophie and James close. The twins looked terrified. "Where is she?" Chris demanded. "They took her back there." Jasmine pointed to the double doors. "They wouldn't let me go with her. They said her oxygen levels were too low." Chris pulled all of them into his arms, his family, even if he and Jasmine weren't together anymore. "She's going to be okay. She has to be okay." Hours passed in the waiting room. Sophie and James eventually fell asleep on the uncomfortable chairs, but Chris and Jasmine stayed awake, waiting for news. "I should have seen it coming," Jasmine said quietly. "She was wheezing a little last night, but I thought her inhaler would be enough." "Don't," Chris said firmly. "Don't blame yourself. You're an amazing mother." "Some mother," Jasmine laughed bitterly. "I can't even protect her from this." "Hey," Chris took her hand. "Remember what you told me when I first came back? That we handle things together now. That goes both ways. You're not alone anymore." A doctor finally emerged from the double doors. "Mr. and Mrs. Langston?" Neither corrected him. "How is she?" they asked in unison. "Mia is stable now, but she had a severe asthma attack. Her airways were severely constricted. We've started her on medication, but we'd like to keep her overnight for observation." "Can we see her?" Chris asked. The doctor nodded. "She's been asking for both of you and her siblings." They woke Sophie and James gently, and the family followed the doctor to Mia's room. She looked so small in the hospital bed, with tubes in her nose and monitors beeping around her. "Daddy?" Her voice was weak. "You came." Chris rushed to her side, taking her tiny hand in his. "Of course I came, sweetheart. I'll always come when you need me. Both of you." Mia smiled tiredly at her parents. "Together." Jasmine and Chris exchanged a look over their daughter's head. Even in the hospital, Mia was trying to play matchmaker. Sophie and James climbed carefully onto their sister's bed. "Does it hurt?" Sophie asked. "Not anymore," Mia assured them. "The doctors gave me special medicine. I was scared," James admitted. "Me too," Mia said. "But then I remembered what Daddy said about stars, that we're all special stars that shine our own way. I just needed to shine a little harder to breathe better." Chris felt his throat tighten. He hadn't known his words had meant so much to her. The night wore on. The twins eventually fell asleep again, curled up in a chair together. Jasmine and Chris sat on either side of Mia's bed, neither willing to leave. "You don't have to stay," Jasmine told him around midnight. "I know you have that big merger tomorrow." "Barbara's handling it," Chris said firmly. "This is where I need to be." Mia stirred in her sleep and both parents instinctively reached to adjust her blanket. Their hands touched briefly. "Remember when they were born?" Jasmine asked softly. "How tiny they were." "I wish I had been there," Chris said, the familiar regret washing over him. "You're here now." Jasmine's voice was gentle. "When it matters." Morning came, and with it better news. Mia's breathing had improved significantly, and the doctor said she could go home the next day, but she would need more aggressive treatment for her asthma, including daily nebulizer treatments. "I'll get the best specialists," Chris promised. "Whatever she needs." "We can handle the cost," Jasmine started, but Chris shook his head. "Please let me do this. Not because I'm trying to throw money at the problem, but because she's my daughter and I love her. I love all of them." Jasmine studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Okay, but I have conditions. Anything. We do this as a team. Every decision we make together. And you have to promise me something else." "What's that?" "Promise me you won't disappear again, not just for Mia, but for all of them. They need their father. The father you are now, not the man you were before." Chris looked at his sleeping daughter, at the twins curled up together, at the woman who had raised them alone for so long. "I promise. On everything I love, I promise." Later that day, when Mia was feeling stronger, Chris pulled out his phone. "Want to see something special?" He showed her a video of the aurora borealis he had found online. "See those lights in the sky? They're like nature's own special stars, and guess what? When you're feeling better, we're all going to take a trip to see them." Mia's eyes widened. "Really? All of us?" "All of us," Jasmine confirmed from the doorway. "As a family. But not until you're stronger," Chris added. "So you have to follow all the doctor's orders, okay?" Mia nodded solemnly. "I will. I want to see the skylights with my whole family." That evening, as Mia slept peacefully, her breathing finally easy, Chris sat in the hospital corridor. He pulled out his phone and began composing an email to his board of directors. "Effective immediately, I am stepping back from day-to-day operations," he wrote. "My family needs me, and for the first time in my life, I'm choosing what really matters." He pressed send without hesitation. Success had a different meaning now. It wasn't measured in dollars or deals, but in the steady breathing of his sleeping daughter and the trust in her eyes when she called him Daddy. Down the hall, he could hear Sophie explaining constellations to James and Jasmine's gentle laughter. His family, his real success story. The news about Chris Langston stepping down from active management of his company made all the business papers. "Billionaire chooses family over fortune," read one headline. But Chris didn't care about the headlines anymore. His focus was entirely on his family, especially Mia's recovery. 2 weeks after the hospital scare, Chris had transformed one of the rooms in his house into a special art studio for Mia. The room had perfect lighting, an air purifier, and all the art supplies a 5-year-old could dream of. "Is this really all for me?" Mia asked, her eyes wide as she took in the easels and paints. "All for you, princess," Chris smiled. "The doctors said you need a calm place to do your breathing treatments. I thought maybe art could help make those treatments more fun." Jasmine stood in the doorway watching them. She'd been doing that a lot lately, watching Chris with the children, seeing how he'd changed. "The nebulizer treatments take 20 minutes, she reminded them. "That's a long time for a 5-year-old to sit still." "That's why I got these." Chris pulled out a set of watercolor paints. "You can paint while the medicine helps you breathe. And look, Sophie and James have spaces too." He showed them the other corners of the room. A small telescope by the window for Sophie and a comfy reading nook with sports magazines for James. "So we can all be together during Mia's treatments," he explained. Jasmine felt tears in her eyes. This was the man she had fallen in love with all those years ago, before money and success had changed him. He was back, but different. Better. "Mommy, can we stay here tonight?" Sophie asked. "Please." The children had been splitting their time between both homes, but since Mia's hospital stay, they'd been wanting to be together as a family more often. "Actually," Chris spoke up, "I wanted to talk to all of you about something." He led them to the living room where they all sat on the big couch that had become their favorite spot for family meetings. "I've been thinking," he started. "This house is too big for just me, and Mia needs both her parents close by for her treatments. So what if we turned this into our family home? All of us." The children's eyes lit up, but Jasmine tensed. "Chris," "Not like that," he quickly added. I had the contractor look at it. We can create 2 completely separate living spaces. You and the kids would have the main house, and I could take the guest house out back. We'd each have our own space. But we'd be close enough for the children, especially for Mia's late-night treatments. I want that, James exclaimed. Then we could play soccer in the backyard every day. And use the telescope, Sophie added. And paint together, Mia said softly. Jasmine looked at their hopeful faces. Can I think about it? Of course, Chris said. No pressure. It's just an idea. But later that night, after the children were asleep, Jasmine found Chris in the kitchen. Did you really mean what you said about separate spaces? Completely separate, he assured her. I know we're not getting back together, Jasmine. I respect that. This isn't about us, it's about them. She sat at the kitchen island. The thing is, you're different now. I had to be, he said simply. When I saw Mia in that hospital bed, I finally understood what you tried to tell me all those years ago. Success means nothing if you don't have people to share it with. The old Chris would have just thrown money at the problem, hired nurses, bought medical equipment. The old Chris was an idiot, he smiled sadly. The old Chris missed first steps, first words, first everything. I can't get those moments back, but I can be here for all the moments to come. Just then, they heard coughing from upstairs. Both parents rushed to Mia's room, finding her sitting up in bed, wheezing slightly. I got it, Chris said, already reaching for the nebulizer. He sat on the bed, helping Mia with her mask, while Jasmine got her art supplies ready. Tell me a story, Mia asked through the mask. Which one would you like? Chris asked. The one about how you and Mummy met. Chris and Jasmine exchanged looks. They had never told the children that story. Well, Chris began, it was a rainy day, much like today. As he told the story of meeting Jasmine in a coffee shop during law school, before he'd inherited his father's company, before money had seemed so important, he watched his daughter paint. Her breathing eased as she listened and created. Sophie and James wandered in, drawn by the story. Soon all 3 children were sitting on the bed, listening to tales of their parents' past. And then Daddy got really silly and spilled coffee all over himself, Jasmine added, making the children giggle. Only because you made me nervous, Chris defended himself, grinning. You were the prettiest girl I'd ever seen. Are you still in love? Sophie asked innocently. The adults paused. Finally, Jasmine spoke. We love each other differently now. We love each other as your parents and as friends. That's okay too, Mia said wisely, as long as we're together. Later, after the children were asleep again, Jasmine looked at the house plans Chris had drawn up. The guest house really would be completely separate? Totally. You'd never even have to see me if you didn't want to, she smiled. That's not what I want. The children need both of us, and you've proven that you can be the father they deserve. Is that a yes? It's a let's try it. For them. Chris nodded, understanding completely. This wasn't a romantic reunion. It was something different. Something maybe even more important. The next morning, he called his contractor. As he discussed the renovations, he looked out at the garden where his children were playing. James was practicing soccer moves, Sophie was explaining something scientific to her siblings, and Mia was setting up her easel. His phone buzzed with messages from the office, from board members concerned about his decision to step back. He ignored them all. Instead, he took a picture of his children and sent it to his mother. This is what real success looks like, he wrote. Eleanor's response surprised him. Yes, it does. Your father and I would like to come for dinner this weekend. If that's okay with Jasmine. Chris smiled. Everyone was learning, changing, growing, all because of 3 little stars who had shown them what really mattered. In her art studio, Mia was painting again. This time, her picture showed 2 houses, one big, one small, with 5 people in between them. Above them, she painted a bright blue sky filled with stars. That's beautiful, Chris said, watching over her shoulder during her morning breathing. Treatment. It's us, Mia explained. All of us together. Different, but still a family. Out of the mouths of babes, Chris thought. Different, but still a family. Maybe that was the best kind of family to be. Moving day brought chaos to the Langston property. Movers carried furniture, while construction workers put the finishing touches on the renovated guest house. The children ran excited circles around everyone, darting between boxes and workers. Be careful, Jasmine called out as the triplets nearly collided with a man carrying paint cans. I got them, Chris said, scooping up James under one arm and Sophie under the other. Mia followed, giggling at her siblings' predicament. "Daddy, put us down," Sophie squealed. I don't know," Chris pretended to think about it. "What do you think, Mia? Should I put them down? Only if they help me organize my art supplies," Mia bargained, showing a hint of her father's business sense. Eleanor Langston watched this scene from the front porch, a strange expression on her face. She had come to help with the move, bringing an army of professional organizers with her, but now she was just watching her son with his children. "He's different with them, isn't he?" Jasmine said, joining her former mother-in-law on the porch. Eleanor nodded slowly. "I haven't seen him laugh like that since before you left. He's found his way back to himself," Jasmine observed. "The real Chris, not the one the business world created." Eleanor turned to her daughter-in-law. Ex-daughter-in-law. She corrected herself mentally. "I owe you an apology, Jasmine. What I said at the park that day, it was unforgivable, but not unexpected," Jasmine said gently. "You were protecting your son, your family name." "I was wrong," Eleanor admitted. "You protected those children far better than we ever could have. You gave them love instead of a legacy." Inside the house, Chris was helping the children set up their rooms. Each child had picked a special project to do with their father. In Sophie's room, they were hanging a massive solar system model from the ceiling. "Jupiter's the biggest planet," Sophie informed him seriously. "That's right," Chris agreed, "just like you're the biggest by 2 minutes. But size doesn't matter." Sophie recited something her mother often said. "We're all special in different ways." In James's room, they were setting up a display case for his growing collection of soccer trophies. "Even the participation ones?" Chris asked. "Mommy says every trophy tells a story," James explained. "Even the ones that don't say, winner." Mia's room took the longest. They had to set up her easel just right, position her nebulizer where she could reach it easily, and arrange all her art supplies by color. "Perfect," Mia declared finally. Chris looked around at his daughters. Tarum, remembering the sterile hospital room from just weeks ago. "Yes, it is perfect." That evening, after the workers and movers had left, the family gathered in the kitchen. Eleanor had insisted on cooking dinner, or rather having her chef cook dinner. "Grandma," Sophie asked as they ate, "will you and Grandpa visit more now?" Eleanor glanced at Jasmine, who nodded slightly. "We'd like that very much, dear, if it's all right with your parents." "Both of them," James checked. "Both of them," Eleanor confirmed. "Your mother and father are both part of this family." After dinner, Chris walked his mother to her car. "Thank you," he said simply. "For what?" "For trying. For accepting this unconventional arrangement." Eleanor touched her son's cheek. "You know, watching you today, the way you are with them, with Jasmine, I finally understand why you stepped back from the company. Some things are worth more than money." As the days passed, the family settled into a routine. Every morning, Chris made breakfast for everyone in the main house before heading to his office in the guest house. He had kept a few key roles in the company, but delegated most of the day-to-day operations. The children moved freely between both houses, treating the guest house like an extension of their home. They had even decorated one of its rooms as their special space, a place where they could go when they needed time with just their dad. One evening about a month after the move, Jasmine found Chris sitting on the back porch of the guest house looking troubled. "What's wrong?" she asked, sitting in the other chair. "The board wants me back full-time," he said. "They're not happy with the current arrangement." "What are you going to do?" Chris looked at the main house where they could see the children through the windows. Mia was doing her evening breathing treatment while painting. Sophie was reading a book about space, and James was organizing his soccer cards. "I'm going to tell them no," he said firmly. "I'll sell my shares if I have to. I'm not missing any." "More moments." Jasmine touched his arm gently. "You really have changed." "I had good teachers," he smiled, nodding toward the children. Inside, they heard Mia coughing. Both parents stood automatically, but Jasmine waved Chris back down. "I've got this one," she said. "You had the morning treatment." As she walked away, Chris called after her. "Jasmine, thank you." "For what?" "For giving me another chance to be their father. For showing me what really matters." She smiled. "You did that yourself, Chris. The moment you chose them over everything else." Later that night, after the children were asleep, Chris sat in his guest house office. But instead of looking at business reports, he was going through a box of drawings Mia had made for him. One showed their 2 houses with the words, "My Happy Family," written in wobbly letters. His phone rang. It was Richard, his father. "The board called me," Richard said without preamble. "They want me to talk sense into you." Chris waited, tensing for the argument. I told them to go to hell. You what? I told them that my son had finally learned what I never did, that family comes first. Always. Richard's voice softened. I'm proud of you, son. Chris looked at Mia's drawing again. Thanks, Dad. Want to come over this weekend? James has a soccer game. Wouldn't miss it, Richard said. Your mother's already picked out her cheering outfit. After hanging up, Chris walked to the main house to do one final check on the children, something that had become his nightly ritual. He found Jasmine doing the same thing. They stood together in the hallway between the children's rooms, listening to their peaceful breathing. We did good, Jasmine whispered. You did good, Chris corrected. I'm just trying to catch up. You're catching up just fine, she assured him. They shared a smile, not a romantic one, but one of deep understanding. They had found their way to a different kind of love, one built on co-parenting and friendship and 3 amazing children. As Chris walked back to his guest house, he saw a shooting star streak across the sky. He remembered what he'd told the children about stars and families and shining in your own way. Some people might think their arrangement was strange. 2 houses, 2 separate lives, but one united family. But Chris knew better now. Family wasn't about conventional arrangements or traditional structures. Family was about love, in all its many forms. 6 months had passed since the family moved into their unconventional arrangement. Fall had turned to winter, and now spring was bringing new life to the garden that connected the main house to Chris's guest house. But more than just flowers were blooming. Healing was taking place one day at a time. The occasion was James's first big soccer game. The whole family had gathered at the local field. Chris and Jasmine, Eleanor and Richard, even Barbara, had come to watch. But something was wrong. James sat on the bench, refusing to play. He's nervous, Jasmine explained to Chris. He's afraid of disappointing everyone. Chris looked at his son, seeing his own childhood fears reflected in those young eyes. Without hesitation, he walked over to the bench. Hey, buddy, he said softly. Want to tell me what's going on? James looked down at his cleats. What if I mess up? What if I make you and Grandpa ashamed? Chris felt his heart break a little. How many times had he felt that same fear as a child? How many times had that fear driven him to push away everything that really mattered? James, look at me, he said, kneeling in front of his son. Do you know what makes me proud? Not winning or being perfect. What makes me proud is seeing you try your best, just like you do when you help Mia with her breathing exercises, or when you listen to Sophie's space stories even when you don't understand them. Really? James looked up, hopefully. Really? And you know what else? It's okay to be scared. Being brave doesn't mean not being scared. It means doing something even though you're scared. From the sidelines, Richard watched this exchange. He turned to Eleanor, his voice thick with emotion. We should have been that kind of parents to him. Eleanor squeezed her husband's hand. He learned from our mistakes. He became a better parent than we were. James finally stood up, ready to join the game. Before running onto the field, he hugged his father tight. Thanks, Daddy. The game wasn't perfect. James's team didn't win. But every time he looked at the sidelines, he saw his whole family cheering for him. Not because he was winning, but because he was trying. After the game, as the family walked to their cars, Richard pulled Chris aside. Son, I need to say something, he began. Something I should have said years ago. Chris waited, seeing the struggle in his father's face. I'm sorry, Richard said finally. I'm sorry for making you think that success in business was more important than success in life. I'm sorry for pushing you so hard that you almost lost what really mattered. Chris felt tears threatening. Dad, no, let me finish. Watching you with your children, seeing how you've chosen them over everything else, it's made me realize how wrong I was. The company, the money, none of it means anything compared to this. I learned that too late, Chris admitted. Not too late, Richard corrected. Look around you. Chris did. He saw Sophie showing her grandmother a new constellation she'd discovered. Mia was drawing the soccer field in her sketchbook, while Jasmine held her inhaler, just in case. James was still on the field, practicing penalty kicks even after the game. That evening they all gathered at the main house for dinner, a new family tradition. Eleanor and Richard had shed their formal business attire for casual clothes, looking more relaxed than Chris had ever seen them. Grandma, Mia asked as they ate, will you teach me to make cookies like you used to make for Daddy? Eleanor nearly dropped her fork. You want to bake with me? If that's okay, Mia said shyly. Oh, sweetheart, Eleanor's voice wavered. Nothing would make me happier. Later, As the children showed their grandparents their rooms, Jasmine found Chris in the kitchen doing the dishes. "Your parents have changed too," she observed. "They're trying," Chris agreed. "Just like I am." "You've done more than try, Chris. You've succeeded where it matters most." He looked at her curiously. "What do you mean? Remember when we were first married? How you used to say you wanted to be a success story? I was so wrong about what that meant." "No," Jasmine smiled. "You just needed time to figure out what kind of success story you wanted to be. And now look, you're the story of a father who chose love over money, who learned from his mistakes and became better because of them." From upstairs came the sound of laughter. Sophie was apparently giving Grandpa Richard a lecture on the solar system, complete with sound effects. "We all have regrets," Jasmine continued. "I regret not trying harder to tell you about the pregnancy. You regret not being there. Your parents regret how they raised you, but regrets don't matter as much as what we do next." "When did you get so wise?" Chris teased. "Around the time I had to raise triplets by myself," she shot back, but her smile was warm. That night, after his parents had left and the children were in bed, Chris sat in his guest house looking at old photos. He found one from his own childhood. A little boy in a suit, standing stiffly beside his father at a board meeting. Next to it, he placed a recent photo of James hugging him after the soccer game, both of them muddy and smiling. The contrast couldn't have been clearer. His phone buzzed with a text from Jasmine. "Mia's asking for you, bad dream." Within minutes, he was in the main house, holding his daughter as she cried about a nightmare. Sophie and James appeared too, drawn by their sister's distress. "Can we all sleep in the fort again?" James asked. Chris looked at Jasmine, who nodded. Soon, the living room was transformed into their familiar blanket fort. The children fell asleep, listening to their parents tell stories about their own childhoods, not the fancy parties or business successes, but the small, real moments that made a family. As Chris headed back to his guest house in the early morning hours, he realized something. The wounds of the past, his own childhood, his mistakes with Jasmine, the years he'd missed with his children, they weren't gone, but they were healing, transforming into something else. Wisdom, understanding, and most importantly, love. He looked back at the main house, where his family slept peacefully. Success, he now knew, wasn't about what you gained. It was about what you gave back. And he had the rest of his life to give his children everything that really mattered. 1 year had passed since that fateful night at LeBlanc restaurant. 1 year since Chris had first seen his children, since his life had changed forever. Now, on a warm evening in spring, the restaurant was once again full of important people, but this time for a very different reason. "Happy birthday!" The crowd cheered as the triplets blew out their candles. 6 years old, Chris could hardly believe it. The private room at LeBlanc had been transformed, gone with a stuffy business atmosphere and formal place settings. Instead, there were balloons, streamers, and 3 different cakes, one for each child's unique taste. "Make a wish," Jasmine encouraged them. "But we already have everything we want," Sophie said matter-of-factly. Eleanor dabbed at her eyes with a napkin. Next to her, Richard beamed with pride. They had come so far from being the cold, business-focused grandparents they once were. Now, Eleanor spent every Tuesday baking with Mia, while Richard never missed one of James's soccer games. "Speech," Barbara called out. She had become like family over the past year, more than just Chris's assistant. Chris stood up, looking around the room. "A year ago, I sat in this restaurant thinking I had everything I needed. I had money, success, power, but I was wrong. I had nothing, because I didn't have what really mattered." He looked at his children. Mia in her purple party dress, Sophie with her telescope-shaped hair clips, James in his soccer jersey despite the formal occasion. Then 3 little stars came into my life and showed me what true success looks like. It looks like Mia's breathing getting stronger every day, like Sophie discovering a new constellation, like James scoring his first goal. He turned to Jasmine. "And it looks like forgiveness, understanding, and second chances. Thank you for giving me the chance to be their father." "Group hug," James declared, and suddenly Chris found himself surrounded by his children. "Can we give them their special present now?" Eleanor asked eagerly. Chris nodded. 3 large envelopes were brought out, one for each child. Inside each envelope was a letter and a legal document. "What is it?" Sophie asked, studying the papers carefully. "Well," Chris explained, "remember how we talked about different kinds of families? How some live in one house, some in 2, some have different names?" The children nodded. "These papers make it official that you're Langstons, but only if you want to be. You can keep your mother's last name if you prefer. It's your choice. We'd be Langstons." "Like you and Grandma and Grandpa?" James asked. "Yes, but more importantly, it shows the whole world what we already know, that we're a family. Different from some families maybe, but still a family." "Can we hyphenate?" Mia asked, surprising everyone with her vocabulary. "Carter Langston. So we have both names?" Chris and Jasmine exchanged proud looks. "Of course you can," Jasmine said, "if that's what you want." "I want that too," Sophie agreed quickly. "Me three," James added. And so it was decided. The papers were signed, making official what their hearts had known for months. They were the Carter Langston family, unique and perfect in their own way. Later that evening, as the party wound down, Chris found himself back at the same spot where he had first seen his children a year ago. Jasmine joined him. "Penny, for your thoughts?" she asked. "I was just thinking about that night. How scared I was when I realized they might be mine. And now I can't imagine my life without them." "You've come a long way," she said softly. "We all have." He looked at their children, now showing their grandparents how to play a new game they'd invented. "Thank you, Jasmine." "For what?" "For not giving up on me completely, for letting me be part of their lives, for showing me what matters." She touched his arm gently. "You did the hard work yourself, Chris. You chose them. Every day you choose them. And I always will," he promised. The children ran over, full of cake and excitement. "Daddy, can we show Mommy our surprise now?" Chris checked his watch. Perfect timing. They all went outside to the restaurant's garden terrace. The sun was setting, painting the sky in beautiful colors. "Look up," Chris told them. Right on cue, lights began to dance across the sky. Not the real aurora borealis he had promised them, but a beautiful light show he had arranged, creating the illusion of dancing lights among the stars. "It's magic," Mia whispered. "Like our family," Sophie added. "Better than winning any soccer game," James declared. Chris looked at his family, his children gazing at the lights, Jasmine smiling proudly, his parents holding hands like teenagers, Barbara taking pictures of everything. This was his real empire, his true success story. 1 year ago, he had been a different man, a man who measured worth in dollars and deals. Now he measured it in hugs, in bedtime stories, in soccer games and science projects and crayon drawings. "Daddy?" Mia tugged at his sleeve. "Will you teach me to draw the lights?" "Of course, Princess. We can try tomorrow during your breathing treatment." "Can we all draw together?" Sophie asked. "Even though I'm not good at art," James added. "Especially because you're not good at art," Chris laughed. "That's what families do. We try things together, even when we're not good at them." Later, that night, after the party was over and the children were asleep in their rooms in the main house, Chris sat in his guest house, looking at their birthday cards to him. Each one was different. Mia's was a beautiful drawing, Sophie's included, scientific facts about birthdays around the world, and James's had a soccer ball sticker and slightly crooked letters. He placed them carefully in a special album he kept, not of business achievements or press clippings, but of real success. His children's artwork, school reports, photographs of family moments. On the last page, he placed a new photo from tonight, all of them looking up at the lights, their faces full of wonder. Below it he wrote, "The real meaning of success, loving and being loved in return." Chris Langston, once known as the ruthless businessman who had everything, now had something far more valuable, a family that proved second chances were possible, that love could heal old wounds, and that sometimes the best success stories weren't about what you gained, but about what you found when you weren't even looking. And as he walked the path between his guest house and the main house one last time that night, checking on his sleeping children as he always did, he knew that this moment, this life, this love, was worth more than all the billions he'd ever made. He had finally found his true fortune, and it was worth every star in the sky.